I listed my half of the family lake cabin, then my sister filed a fake deed claiming I verbally gifted it to her LLC. Hi, I'm Caleb, 36, and last year I found out my dad secretly sold the house I grew up in my grandparents' house to pay off my younger sister's debt. He told me via voicemail. A voicemail? Hey bud, just a heads up, we closed on the Glenwood property. Rachel's situation got worse. I'll explain later. Love ya. That was it. 30 years of birthdays, Thanksgivings, graduation parties, gone in a 30-second message squeezed between love ya and a Verizon jingle. I was in the middle of a deposition prep when I heard it. Pressed pause. Listened again. Then did something I hadn't done since I was 19. I left the office early without giving a reason. My paralegal stared at me like I'd just broken lawyer protocol and committed a felony. Honestly, it felt like I had. Because that house wasn't just real estate. It was the only thing in our family that hadn't been borrowed, broken, or bailed out of. My grandfather built it in 1962 with his own hands and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. My grandmother died there. It had a dent in the hallway from when I slammed my skateboard into the wall after Rachel stole my iPod. I had my first kiss under the back porch light and my last conversation with my mother on the front steps after her second round of chemo. And my dad just sold it to cover my sister's maxed out credit cards and mysterious business expenses. Let me rewind a little. Rachel is 32. We are not close. That's the polite version. The real version is I haven't trusted her since I was 17 and she pawned my laptop while I was at swim practice. She said it was an accident. That she thought it was hers. Mine had a sticker on the lid that said not Rachel's. Dead serious. She cried. My parents bought her a new purse. I bought a new laptop with the money I made working nights at a gas station while trying to get into law school. She's always been like that, chaotic with a lowercase c. The kind of person who disappears for 6 months and resurfaces at brunch with a spiritual tattoo and a boyfriend named Sky who thinks rent is a government scam. I've been the opposite. I own a condo with exposed brick. I cook dinner most nights. I floss. Anyway, after I got that voicemail, I drove straight to my dad's place. Walked in the door, didn't even knock, and said, "What the hell is Glenwood sold supposed to mean?" He looked up from the TV, remote still in hand, and sighed like I'd just interrupted a very important football play. "Caleb," he said, "she was in trouble." "Real trouble?" I asked what kind of trouble. He waved his hand. "You know how she is. Credit stuff. A few people she owed. Nothing violent." Nothing violent. That's our new metric now. He went on to explain that Rachel had made some bad decisions and it was getting scary and she promised to turn things around. He said the Glenwood place was just sitting there. I reminded him it was sitting there because it was the only thing we agreed not to touch. That it was supposed to go to me and Rachel both eventually. That mom's ashes were in the garden. He said he moved the ashes. Like that fixed it. I asked how much he owed. He wouldn't say. So I said something I never thought I would, "Then you don't get to ask me to be in her life anymore." He didn't try to stop me when I walked out. I didn't talk to my dad for 5 months after that. Not a text, not a call, nothing for his birthday, nothing for mine. Rachel didn't reach out either, which was just as well. I kept expecting her to pop up with one of her classic apologies, something long, dramatic, full of spiritual metaphors and zero actual accountability. But silence? That was new. Almost eerie. Emma, my wife, was the only person who knew how close I came to losing it over all of it. One night, 2 weeks after the voicemail, she found me in the kitchen at 1 a.m. just staring at the fridge. I hadn't opened it. Wasn't hungry. I just needed something cold to stand next to because the inside of my chest felt like it was overheating. "Talk to me," she said, handing me a glass of water. I told her everything. The house, the voicemail, the pawned laptop flashbacks, my dad acting like the whole thing was just a minor inconvenience on par with losing cable. I told her I didn't care about the money, that it wasn't about the house. Which, of course, meant it was about the house. About what it represented. Stability. Memory. Proof that something in our family could survive. Emma didn't say much at first. Just held my hand and asked, "Do you want to call a lawyer?" I almost laughed. I am a lawyer. But the truth was, even I didn't know if I had legal standing. My dad had been on the deed. He hadn't needed my signature. Morally? It was nuclear-level betrayal. Legally? Just a Tuesday in real estate. So I did the one thing I hadn't done in a decade. I called my Aunt Liz. Liz is my mom's sister and the family's unofficial BS detector. She's also one of the few people who ever called my dad out without blinking. I asked her straight up, "Did you know he was selling Glenwood?" She sighed into the phone. "I found out the day after it closed. He told me not to tell you. Said it would only cause drama." Of course he did. Then she said, "You might want to look into Rachel's LLCs." I blinked. Her what? Apparently, sometime in the last 2 years, Rachel had become a wellness entrepreneur. She had 3 LLCs registered under her name in the state directory, one for candles, one for spiritual coaching, and one that just said creative consulting. All of them had the same mailing address. Not her apartment. Not my dad's house. The Glenwood property. She'd been running her little influencer circus out of our family home, probably hosting healing retreats and full moon ceremonies on the lawn I used to mow for $5. I stared at the registration forms, mouth dry. And that's when the real plan started forming in my head. I called in a favor the next morning. A buddy of mine from law school, Mark, now works in white-collar investigations, mostly corporate fraud, but he's good with paper trails. I forwarded him the LLC info and asked, "Just tell me if anything smells funny." Mark got back to me within 48 hours, and the man sounded like Christmas had come early. "Caleb, this is Amateur Hour. One of these LLCs lists a mailing address in California on a federal business filing, but lists your family's Glenwood property on the state registration. That's a red flag right there. Then there's the creative consulting one. It's registered for charitable work, but took a $25,000 payment from a company that sells luxury chakra water. That's not illegal, but it's sketchy as hell." He paused. "Oh, and get this, one of the businesses applied for a Cavalier, a small business grant. Guess where the check was mailed? Glenwood." Bingo. Let me be clear, I wasn't looking to destroy Rachel. I didn't want to see her behind bars. But I did want the truth. For once. In writing. In public record. Because I was tired of being the only one in our family held to any kind of standard. So I filed a request for financial disclosures related to the grant. Public funds, public oversight. I drafted it under a separate firm's letterhead so it wouldn't blow back on me professionally. Then I sent a second letter to the county recorder's office requesting the sale documents for Glenwood, just to confirm how much it sold for and to whom. Guess who bought it? Rachel's boyfriend, Sky. Full name, Skylar Jennings, owner of a limited real estate company that, until 3 months before the sale, hadn't owned a single property. The purchase was financed almost entirely by a personal loan from my dad, secured against his pension. I stared at the papers and laughed out loud. Not a happy laugh. The kind you make when you realize the circus isn't just in town, it married into your family. It was a shell game. My dad sold the house to cover Rachel's debts, but in reality, he funneled money to her through her boyfriend. Probably so Rachel could keep her name clean while still having access to the property. Maybe to avoid tax complications. Maybe because even my dad knew she couldn't be trusted with her own name on the deed. I brought it all to Amit. She read every page, quiet, methodical, like she was reviewing a patient file. Then she looked up and said, "You know what this means, right? That my dad willingly tanked his retirement to launder Rachel's latest reinvention?" She nodded. "And they still expected you to pretend nothing happened." "Right." That night, I typed out a letter to my dad. Not a text. Not an email. A proper letter. I told him I knew about the LLCs, the grant money, the fake buyer. I told him I didn't plan on suing yet, but that any further manipulation involving family assets or my name would be met with legal action. I told him I was done being the family's safety net, the fixer, the invisible backbone propping up their chaos. Then I mailed a copy to Rachel, just so we were all crystal clear. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was my dad. I didn't answer. He tried again the next day. Left a voicemail this time. "Son, I think you're overreacting. You've always been the responsible one, the one we could count on. I just did what I had to do to keep the family afloat. We should talk." I didn't call back. Instead, I booked a real estate agent. Glenwood might have been gone, but it wasn't the only thing left in the family name. There was still the lake cabin, the one my grandparents bought as a fixer-upper in the 70s and never really fixed. My dad and I co-owned it 50/50 because of a paperwork oversight when my grandmother passed. For years it just sat there, collecting dust and mildew, and my dad always said we'd figure out what to do with it eventually. Well, I was ready to figure it out. So I told my agent to list my share. A week later, I got a cease and desist letter. From Rachel. Apparently, she had filed to transfer my half of the cabin to her LLC, claiming verbal consent from the co-owner after my dad gifted her his half. She even filed a quitclaim deed. No lawyer, just a notary from her spiritual collective in Ojai. She thought that would work. I haven't laughed that hard in years. I called Mark. "You want to file for fraud, forgery, or full scorched earth?" he asked. I said all three. The thing about forged documents is they unravel fast when put under legal pressure. Mark filed a formal complaint with the county clerk's office flagging the quitclaim deed as fraudulent. We attached evidence. The so-called notary had an expired commission, Rachel had no written permission from me, and the transfer was filed after my dad sold Glenwood, meaning he technically didn't own the cabin anymore to gift his share. That alone would have been enough to freeze the title, but just for fun, we also included a copy of Rachel's LLC filings showing a pattern of shady self-dealing, and a signed affidavit from Aunt Liz, who swore under penalty of perjury that my grandmother's will had specified the cabin was never to be subdivided without unanimous family consent. The clerk flagged the deed as under dispute, and my agent yanked the listing until ownership was resolved. Rachel's response? She posted a 4-minute video to Instagram titled "When Family Betrays You, A Story of Healing." She lit a sage bundle, wore a flowy white top, called me her brother, a wounded masculine energy, and said that I was attacking her sacred workspace. Apparently, the cabin, rotting porch, and all was now a retreat hub for generational trauma healing. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Friends, coworkers, even a judge I clerked for once. "Dude, is this your sister? Tell me this is performance art. Please sue her, for humanity." I didn't reply. Not yet, because the real fun started the next morning. Mark forwarded me an email. It was from the state attorney general's office. Turns out, when you apply for public grant money and then start faking deeds to build your healing empire, someone eventually notices. They were opening an inquiry. Not a raid, not an arrest, just a polite request for Rachel to provide receipts, bookkeeping, and proof that her grant money was used for legitimate small business expenses, not, say, manifestation retreats held in a moldy cabin she didn't own. I didn't press charges. I didn't have to. By week's end, the fake deed was voided, the cabin legally frozen, and Rachel's Instagram quietly went dark. Dad called again. I finally answered. "You happy now?" He snapped. "You humiliated her. You humiliated me." I said, "You forged my signature and helped her launder property." I barely even opened my mouth. "You didn't have to go nuclear." "No," I said. "You just thought I wouldn't fight back." He got real quiet then, like he couldn't believe the safety net had grown teeth. "Caleb, I just wanted to keep the family together." "You didn't," I said. "You just kept letting her burn it down and expecting me to bring a hose." We haven't spoken since. 3 weeks passed. Then came the envelope. Thick, hand-delivered, and slid under the office door with zero ceremony. Rachel was suing me. Specifically, her LLC Moonwell Rising, LLC, I kid you not, was filing a civil claim for interference with business operations and intentional emotional distress. The woman who forged my name on a property deed was now accusing me of destroying her career. The career that consisted, as far as I could tell, of badly edited TikToks and overcharging strangers for vision board workshops. I took the packet to Emma that night. She was halfway through folding laundry when I dropped it on the bed. She glanced at it, then at me. "Is this real?" "Oh, it's real." She thinks I owe her damages for the trauma of Sheik's notes being denied spiritual access to inherited ancestral land. Emma blinked. "You mean the cabin with the rat nest in the stove?" "That's the one." We stood there, staring at the pile of legal nonsense like it might burst into flames on its own. "Are you going to fight it?" she asked. I shrugged. "Absolutely, but not in court." Because Rachel didn't want a judge. She wanted drama, attention, a show, and court would give her too much of that. So I filed a countersuit quietly, formally, and with no warning. Defamation, fraudulent misrepresentation, and damages for attempting to illegally transfer a co-owned asset. Rachel's lawyer, a guy who clearly got hired on Fiverr, sent me a very long, very angry email accusing me of using aggressive patriarchal energy and weaponizing colonial legal frameworks. I forwarded it to Mark. He printed it out and framed it for his office. Within days, Rachel withdrew her suit. But she didn't go quietly. I got a letter from my dad, real letter this time, not voicemail. It was 3 pages long, handwritten, like a 19th century war journal. He accused me of escalating things, of being vindictive, of turning my back on family. There was a paragraph in the middle that said, "I know Rachel's made mistakes, but you have resources she doesn't. You could have been the bigger person." I read that part 5 times. Then I grabbed a pen and wrote back. Just one line. "I've been the bigger person since I was 10. I never mailed it. I didn't need to. The point wasn't to hurt him. It was to finally say it. Out loud. To myself. In ink." The silence after that was thick. And it lasted. No texts. No let's move on calls. No invitations to Easter or Father's Day barbecues. And for the first time in my adult life, that silence felt like peace. The quiet didn't last forever. It cracked the day Rachel went on local radio. Apparently, a New Age wellness podcast, The Conscious Spiral, was doing a feature on female entrepreneurs reclaiming ancestral power. And Rachel, never one to resist a microphone, showed up with incense, a tambourine, and a sob story. Emma and I were driving home from the grocery store when we heard it. I'd flipped on the radio looking for weather updates. Instead, we got. And my own brother sued me. Over land that's technically part of my maternal lineage. I just wanted to heal our family wounds, and he weaponized the court system to suppress my journey. Emma nearly swerved into the next lane. "Oh my God," she said, turning it up. "She's making it sound like you evicted her from a sacred temple." I was frozen, one hand on the bag of frozen peas, listening to Rachel talk about energetic violence, spiritual theft, and how she was being guided to forgive, even though certain wounds run deep. At no point did she mention forging a deed, or misusing a grant, or building a pyramid out of reclaimed floorboards and calling it a healing altar. But what really made my jaw clench? When she said, "Sometimes the people closest to you become the ones who hurt you most, and that's why I'm taking time away from toxic family ties. I'm learning to rise alone." Emma glanced at me. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, actually, I am." Because here's the thing, that was the first time she'd ever publicly admitted we weren't close, that we weren't united, that she wasn't the perpetual little sister living in my emotional guest room. And as much as I wanted to send the podcast a fact-checker and a cease and desist, I didn't. I let her talk. Let her spin her version. Because the people who mattered, my friends, Emma's family, my colleagues, even Aunt Liz, they knew. They saw what happened. They showed up when it counted. And they stayed. Emma's dad, who once called Rachel a walking fire hazard in yoga pants, pulled me aside at dinner one night and said, "You don't owe anyone your silence just because they share your last name." I didn't say anything back, just nodded, let it land. That fall, Emma and I hosted Thanksgiving. Our house, our rules, 12 guests, 0 tension, good food, laughter that didn't come with a guilt hangover. Midway through dinner, as I was carving the turkey, Emma leaned over and whispered, "Does this count as reclaiming ancestral power?" I laughed, so hard I nearly dropped the carving knife. By winter, the dust had mostly settled. Rachel went offline mostly. Her LLCs quietly dissolved one by one. The county voided the deed transfer officially, and the cabin sat untouched, snow piling on the sagging roof like nature's gentle reminder that healing sometimes starts with demolition. I got a handwritten Christmas card from my dad. No letter inside, just a photo of him in front of the Glenwood House, Sky's house now next to a sold sign, and a forced smile. The back read, "Hope you're doing well. Always family. No return address." I didn't reply. Instead, I spent the holidays wrapped in a kind of stillness I didn't know I'd crave. Emma and I hosted a quiet Christmas. Just us, her parents, her sister, and a dog we were watching for a friend. We made mulled wine. We built a fire. We watched Die Hard, which I maintain is a Christmas movie, and Emma continues to debate just to mess with me. At some point, I found myself standing in our backyard, drink in hand, looking up at the stars like I used to do from the Glenwood porch as a kid. But this time, no one was yelling. No one was crying inside. No one was asking me to fix anything. I didn't realize until then how much of my life had been built on that tension, on waiting for the next call, the next emergency, the next "can you just help with one more thing?" That night, there was no next. Just now. Just stillness. In January, I got a call from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. She said, "Hey, I just wanted you to know a lot of us saw what happened. With the house. The cabin. Rachel." I braced for judgment. But she said, "Good for you. Honestly, we all saw how much you carried. Someone had to break the cycle. I thanked her, told her it meant more than she knew. Then I hung up and sat in my office a long time, just thinking. Not planning, not fixing, just being. A week later, Emma and I drove out to the cabin. Not to reopen it. Not yet. We just wanted to see it. The road was half-plowed, the driveway still blanketed in snow. We parked on the shoulder and crunched through ice in our boots, hand in hand. The old porch creaked under us. The front door stuck like always. Inside, it smelled like cold wood and decades of memories. And I'll be honest, part of me expected to feel anger, bitterness, maybe even grief. Instead, I just felt space. Clean, open space. The kind you could rebuild on. Last month, I officially filed paperwork to buy out my dad's half of the cabin. Legally, it was already mine. He'd signed it over to Rachel in that failed deed transfer, which made the whole thing void. But I wanted it clean. No asterisks. No room for future drama. I sent him the offer through his lawyer. Market value, no lowballing. Cash, no contingencies. Simple, quiet. He signed without a word. No letter. No voicemail this time. Just a notarized signature and a legal envelope like I was any other stranger. And honestly, that felt about right. The title came through 3 weeks later. For the first time in my life, I own something in our family outright. No emotional IOUs. No strings. Emma and I drove out again, this time with gloves, paint samples, and 2 thermoses of coffee. We spent the weekend taking measurements, writing notes, and laughing over how many mouse droppings could physically exist under one sagging futon. We made plans, not grand ones, just real ones. Fix the floor, replace the roof, maybe make the back room into a writing space for Emma, where she could finish the novel she kept pretending not to be writing. At one point I stood in the empty kitchen, looking out the window at the lake. The light hit just right, soft and gold like every memory you wish had been more perfect than it was. Emma came up behind me, arms around my waist. "You thinking of tearing it all down?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, just finally building something that's ours." She smiled into my shoulder. "Good. Because I think this place might be the most peaceful house in your family tree." I laughed. Low bar. We didn't talk about my parents much after that. I heard through Liz that Rachel had moved to New Mexico to start fresh. Sky wasn't in the picture anymore. She'd posted something vague about shedding toxic masculinity and realigning with desert energy. Honestly, I wish her luck, for real. As for my dad, I get a birthday card now and then. They're polite, formal, almost businesslike. I send one back. Same tone. No bridges burned, but no illusions left either. Emma and I talk sometimes about what kind of legacy we want. Not in a dramatic, multi-generational estate way. Just the kind of family we want to build. One where family doesn't mean obligation, but trust. Where saying no is allowed. Where silence isn't punishment and help isn't demanded. The cabin's coming along slowly. It'll take time, money, elbow grease. But there's something healing in the work itself. A roof shingle at a time. A weekend of paint and sweat and swearing. One night, we sat on the porch in camp chairs, watching the stars again. I sipped a beer. Emma leaned her head on my shoulder. "You ever miss it?" she asked. "The version of family you thought you had?" I thought about that. "No," I said. "I think I just finally stopped apologizing for not setting myself on fire to keep other people warm." We sat there in the quiet, the lake like glass in front of us. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to fix anything. I just belonged.